My sister banned my kids from her parties for 2 years, so I threw one they weren't invited to, and gave her a taste of her own chaos. Let me start from the beginning. My sister Evelyn and I have always had a complicated relationship. She's 3 years older and has always acted like she knows better about everything. When we both became mothers around the same time, her twins, Jake and Emma, are 6, my daughter Lily is 5, and my son Max is 3. I thought maybe we'd finally bond over shared experiences. Boy, was I wrong. The trouble started about 2 years ago when Evelyn began hosting what she called sophisticated birthday parties for her twins. The first time she mentioned it, I was excited. Finally, our kids could play together and create some cousin memories. But when I asked what time to bring Lily and Max, Evelyn gave me this condescending smile. "Oh, this is going to be more of an adults-only affair," she said, flipping her perfectly styled hair. "You know how it is. I want to actually enjoy conversations without constantly managing children. The twins are old enough to behave appropriately." I was confused, but it's literally a birthday party for 6-year-olds. Trust me, it'll be much more civilized this way. We're having it catered. There's going to be wine, real conversations. You'll love it. Against my better judgment, I agreed. I arranged for a babysitter for Lily and Max, bought beautiful gifts for Jake and Emma, and showed up in my nicest dress, ready for this sophisticated celebration. What I walked into was absolute chaos. Jake and Emma were running around like wild animals, screaming at the top of their lungs. Emma had chocolate cake smeared all over her dress and was wiping her hands on Evelyn's white couch. Jake was throwing pieces of his birthday cake at other kids, and when one little girl started crying, he just laughed and threw more. But here's the kicker. There were other children there. About 8 kids total, all running around unsupervised while the adults sipped wine and pretended not to notice the destruction happening around them. Evelyn's adults-only rule apparently only applied to my children. I watched in horror as Jake deliberately knocked over a glass of juice onto Evelyn's friend's purse. Instead of disciplining him, Evelyn just laughed and said, "Boys will be boys." When Emma started pulling books off the shelves and throwing them on the floor, another parent just smiled and said, "She's so spirited." The worst part? I kept thinking about Lily at home, asking why she couldn't come to her cousin's party. I told her it was just for grown-ups, and she'd accepted it with a heartbreaking resignation that only a 4-year-old can manage. When I got home that night, covered in someone else's child's sticky fingerprints, and with a splitting headache, Lily ran up to me, asking if I'd brought her any cake. I had to tell her there wasn't any left, which wasn't technically a lie. Most of it had ended up on the floor or walls. I thought maybe it was just a one-off thing. Maybe Evelyn would realize how chaotic it had been and adjust for next time. I was so naive. The pattern continued for 2 years. Every single birthday party, every holiday gathering, every celebration Evelyn hosted came with the same rule: adults only. But don't worry, it'll be fun. And every single time I'd show up to find the same chaos, with Jake and Emma treating their guests like personal servants, while the adults got progressively more drunk and less attentive. The breaking point came at Emma's birthday party last spring. I'd specifically asked Evelyn if this one could include all the kids, since Lily had been asking why she never got to play with her cousins at parties. Evelyn had been vague on the phone, just saying, "We'll see how it goes." When I arrived, I immediately saw that familiar scene. Kids everywhere, chaos reigning, and my children notably absent from the invitation list. But this time was different. This time, I sat in my car for 20 minutes, watching through the living room window as Jake smashed a piñata with a baseball bat. Not the plastic bat that came with it, but an actual wooden baseball bat, while Emma screamed that it was her turn and started hitting other children to get to the front. What made it worse was watching the other parents just stand there with their wine glasses laughing as if destruction was entertainment. One mother was actually filming Jake demolishing the piñata while candy flew everywhere and smaller children ducked for cover. Another parent commented loudly, "At least they're getting their energy out." As Emma shoved a crying 4-year-old to grab fallen candy, the living room looked like a war zone. Evelyn's expensive white furniture was covered in chocolate handprints and juice stains. Someone had ground cake into her Persian rug, and there were torn wrapping paper and broken toy pieces scattered everywhere. Through the window, I could see Evelyn frantically trying to clean up spills while simultaneously trying to maintain conversations with other adults. looking increasingly frazzled and overwhelmed. But what really got to me was seeing the other children at the party, kids who were clearly overwhelmed and scared by Jake and Emma's aggressive behavior. One little girl was crying in the corner because Emma had snatched her party favor bag and dumped all the contents on the floor. A younger boy was hiding behind his mother's legs after Jake had deliberately stepped on his foot during musical chairs. These weren't bratty kids acting out. These were normal children being terrorized by two kids who had never learned boundaries. I watched a particularly painful scene unfold when they brought out Emma's birthday cake. Instead of the traditional singing and candle blowing, it turned into a food fight. Emma grabbed a handful of cake and threw it at another child because she wanted to blow out the candles again after already doing it once. Jake joined in, and within minutes there was frosting on the walls, the ceiling, and every person in the room. The adults? They were too drunk to care. I could see Evelyn's face through the window, and she looked like she was about to cry. But instead of addressing her children's behavior, she just kept apologizing to other parents and frantically trying to clean up the mess while Jake and Emma continued their rampage. Lily pressed her face against the car window and asked in the smallest voice, "Mommy, why can't we go inside? I want to play too." Max, who was barely 3 at the time, pointed to the house and said, "Cake! Want cake!" I had to explain to my children again why they couldn't participate in their cousin's birthday party. I watched Lily's face fall as she saw other kids through the window getting cake and gifts and attention while she sat buckled into her car seat in a hot parking lot. Max started crying because he could see the colorful decorations and hear the party sounds but couldn't understand why we weren't going inside. "Are we in trouble, Mommy?" Lily asked. And that question broke my heart into a million pieces. "No, sweetheart, you're not in trouble. Sometimes grown-ups make decisions that don't make sense. But why can't we play with Jake and Emma? Don't they want to play with us? How do you explain to a 4-year-old that her aunt has deemed her unworthy of attending family celebrations? How do you tell your toddler that his cousins get cake and presents while he gets to watch from a car window?" I sat there, watching my children's faces as they saw their cousins getting cake and presents and fun while they sat in a hot car, being told they weren't welcome. That's when I decided things were going to change. But first I had to endure the rest of the party aftermath. When Evelyn finally came outside to say goodbye, she looked exhausted and defeated. Her white dress was stained with various colors of frosting, her hair was disheveled, and she had that frantic look of a parent who had completely lost control. "Thanks for coming," she said, though we both knew I hadn't really come to anything. "How was the party?" I asked, genuinely curious to hear her perspective. "Oh, you know how it is with kids," she said with a forced laugh. "They get so excited. The energy was just a lot." I looked through her living room window at what looked like the aftermath of a tornado. Her couch was destroyed, there was food ground into her carpet, and I could see chocolate handprints on her walls from where we were standing outside. Maybe next time it would be easier if there were more adults to help supervise, I suggested gently. Evelyn's face immediately hardened. The adults were supervising. "It's just that kids will be kids, you know? I don't believe in stifling their natural exuberance." Natural exuberance. That's what she called Jake hitting other children and Emma throwing cake at people. "Right," I said. "Well, I should get these two home for their naps." As I was buckling my kids back into their car seats, Lily asked me again why they couldn't come inside. I gave her some vague answer about it being a small party, but I could see she wasn't buying it. She was getting old enough to understand that she was being excluded, and I could see it was starting to affect her self-esteem. That night, after I put the kids to bed, I called my best friend, Maria, to vent about the situation. "She did it again," I told her. "Same thing. Adults-only party with kids running completely wild, and your kids had to sit in the car again for 20 minutes? Lily asked if she was in trouble. She's starting to think there's something wrong with her, that she's not good enough to play with her cousins. "That's not okay," Maria said firmly. "That's actually damaging to her self-esteem. You need to do something about this." "But what can I do? Evelyn's not going to change. She's convinced her way is right. Then maybe it's time to show her what a real children's party looks like." That conversation planted the seed that would eventually grow into Lily's princess party. But it also made me realize that this wasn't just about birthday parties anymore. This was about my children learning that they matter, that they deserve to be included, that family means something more than conditional acceptance based on arbitrary rules. I started planning immediately. The first thing I did was document everything. I started keeping a journal of every interaction with Evelyn, every party, every exclusion. I wrote down dates, what happened, how my children reacted, and how it made me feel. I wasn't planning anything legal, but I wanted to have a clear record of the pattern of behavior in case anyone in the family questioned my eventual response. I also started talking to other family members more intentionally, not complaining or gossiping but asking casual questions about the parties. How was Jake's party? Did the kids have fun at Emma's celebration? What I discovered was enlightening. Other family members had noticed the chaos too, but no one wanted to say anything because Evelyn got defensive when criticized. My cousin Rachel, who had attended a few of the parties with her own children, confided in me during a family barbecue. "I have to be honest," she said, looking around to make sure Evelyn wasn't in earshot. "I've stopped bringing the kids to her parties last time Jake bit my daughter when she didn't want to share her juice box. When I tried to address it, Evelyn said I was being too sensitive. He bit her, drew blood, and Emma kicked my son in the shin when he accidentally stepped on her toy. But according to Evelyn, my kids were being aggressive for playing too close to her children. I was horrified. The more I talked to family members, the clearer the picture became. Evelyn's parties weren't just chaotic, they were genuinely problematic. Other parents were starting to avoid them. Siblings were finding excuses not to attend. And the only people who seemed to enjoy them were Evelyn, and whatever wine mom friends she invited who thought destructive behavior was hilarious. My brother Mark, who lived across the country and only attended parties via video calls, told me he'd stopped joining the virtual celebrations because it was just too stressful to watch. Even through a screen, Jake and Emma's behavior was overwhelming, he said. Armed with this information, I began my research into proper party planning. I wasn't just going to throw Lily a better party, I was going to throw her the gold standard of children's parties. I was going to show everyone, including Evelyn, what a kid's celebration could look like when planned by someone who actually cared about the children's experience. I spent hours reading child development articles about age-appropriate activities. I learned about attention spans, 20 to 30 minutes max for structured activities with 5-year-olds. Group dynamics. Smaller groups are easier to manage and more fun for everyone, and behavioral expectations, clear rules stated up front, prevent most problems. I researched entertainment options and discovered that the key wasn't expensive performers or elaborate setups. It was having activities that engage children's natural interests while providing structure. Kids want to feel special and included, not overwhelmed and overstimulated. I also looked into the psychology of party planning. Why do some children's parties end in tears and chaos while others leave everyone happy? The answer was surprisingly simple. Successful parties are planned with children's needs in mind, not adults' egos. Then I started saving. Every month, I put aside a little money from my grocery budget, my coffee fund, even the money I usually spent on small treats for myself. I opened a separate savings account that I nicknamed Princess Fund and watched it grow slowly but steadily. I was going to throw Lily the most amazing princess party any 5-year-old had ever seen, and I was going to do it right. But saving wasn't enough. I also started practicing. I volunteered to help with parties at Lily's preschool, offering to lead activities and games. I wanted to make sure I knew how to manage groups of excited children before I attempted my own party. Each event taught me something new about timing, crowd control, and what actually makes kids happy versus what adults think makes kids happy. The preschool parties were a revelation. When activities were well planned and age-appropriate, children were delightful. They followed instructions, played nicely together, and genuinely seemed to enjoy themselves. The key was having realistic expectations and clear boundaries, not letting chaos reign and calling it fun. I also started observing Lily more carefully. What were her actual interests? What made her face light up? What were her favorite games, songs, colors, and activities? I realized that most of the parties we'd attended, including Evelyn's, weren't really planned around what children enjoyed. They were planned around what adults thought looked impressive, or what was trendy on social media. Lily loved princesses, but specifically, she loved the idea of being brave and kind, like the princesses in her favorite stories. She loved creating things with her hands. She loved singing, and she loved feeling important and special. She also thrived with structure and clear expectations. She was happiest when she knew what was expected of her and felt confident she could succeed. With this knowledge, I started designing her party around her actual personality and interests, not around some generic princess party template I found online. I began by doing what Evelyn had never bothered to do. I actually researched how to throw a proper children's party. I watched YouTube videos, read blogs, joined Facebook groups for party planning. I learned about age-appropriate activities, proper supervision ratios, and how to create an environment where kids could have fun without destroying everything in sight. I spent months planning every detail. I researched princesses until I could probably write a dissertation on Disney character development. I learned about party themes, decorations, games, and, most importantly, how to manage a group of excited children so everyone could have fun safely. The guest list was carefully curated. I invited 8 of Lily's closest friends from preschool, children I knew, whose parents I talked to, kids who played well together. I also invited my best friend's daughter, who was Lily's age, and my cousin's son, who was Max's age. Notice who wasn't on the list: Jake and Emma. For the first time in 2 years, I was the one saying no to Evelyn's children. 3 weeks before the party, Evelyn called me. "Hey, I heard through Mom that Lily is having a birthday party. The twins are so excited. What time should I drop them off?" I took a deep breath. This was the moment I'd been preparing for. "Actually, Evelyn, this is going to be more of a small, intimate gathering. Just close friends." There was silence on the other end of the phone. "What do you mean? They're her cousins." "I know, but I've planned activities for a specific group size, and I want to make sure I can properly supervise all the children. You know how important safety is at kids' parties, but they're family. You can't exclude family." The irony was so thick I could have cut it with a knife. "I'm sure you understand," I said sweetly. "Sometimes you have to make difficult decisions about guest lists to ensure the party goes smoothly." She sputtered for a few more minutes, but I held firm. For the first time in years, I was setting a boundary with my sister, and it felt incredible. The party was absolutely magical. I transformed our backyard into a princess wonderland. Pink and gold streamers hung from every tree. There were balloons everywhere, and I'd even rented a small bounce house shaped like a castle. The decorations alone had cost me 3 months of saved coffee money, but seeing Lily's face when she walked outside that morning made it worth every penny. But the decorations were just the beginning. I'd spent weeks planning every detail of the timeline. The party was scheduled from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m., long enough for substantial fun, short enough to avoid overtired meltdowns. I had activities planned for every 15-minute segment, with built-in flexibility for things that were going really well or needed to be shortened. I'd hired a teenager from our neighborhood, Emma, ironically sharing a name with my niece, to dress up as Princess Belle, Lily's favorite. She was absolutely perfect. At 17, she was old enough to be responsible but young enough to connect with the kids. We'd met 3 times before the party to plan her activities and practice staying in character. She arrived an hour early to get into costume and review the schedule one more time. When the guests started arriving, I had a system in place. Each child received a welcome bag with their name on it, containing a plastic tiara, a small magic wand, and some princess stickers. This immediately made them feel special and gave them props for the activities we'd planned. More importantly, it helped me learn everyone's names quickly so I could address them individually throughout the party. The first activity was royal introductions, where Princess Belle helped each child introduce themselves and share their favorite thing about being at a princess party. It was a gentle way to help shy children feel included, and gave the more outgoing kids a chance to shine without dominating the entire event. Then we moved to the Royal Training Academy, an obstacle course I'd set up using pool noodles, hula hoops, and other safe props. The kids had to complete challenges like sneaking past the dragon crawling under pool noodles, crossing the enchanted river stepping on foam lily pads, and retrieving the magic crystal finding hidden plastic gems. Each child got multiple chances to complete the course, and Princess Belle cheered for everyone, making sure no child felt left out or unsuccessful. The craft station was next, decorating their own magic wands using wooden dowels, foam shapes, ribbons, and plastic gems. I'd pre-cut everything and provided child-safe glue sticks, so there was no mess and no frustration with tools they couldn't handle. Princess Belle helped each child create something they were proud of, and the wands became both a party activity and a take-home favor. During craft time, I'd set up the food stations. Everything was designed to be both special and manageable for small hands. Heart-shaped sandwiches cut with cookie cutters from regular peanut butter and jelly and cream cheese sandwiches. Fruit kebabs that look like magic wands, grapes and berries on pretzel sticks. Royal jewels, colorful jello cubes, and princess punch pink lemonade in fancy plastic cups with their names written in gold marker. The treasure hunt was the biggest hit. I'd hidden plastic gems, costume jewelry, and small princess-themed toys around the backyard, with age-appropriate clues that Princess Belle read aloud. The kids worked together to find the treasures, and I'd hidden enough that everyone found multiple items. No tears, no fighting, just pure excitement and cooperation. But the centerpiece was the cake. I'd spent 6 hours the night before creating a 3-tier castle cake with pink and gold frosting, edible glitter, and small plastic princess figures on top. It wasn't just beautiful, it was structurally sound and designed to be cut and served easily. I'd even made cupcakes in addition to the main cake, so everyone could have their own individual treat. The food was simple but special: finger sandwiches cut into heart shapes, fruit kebabs that looked like magic wands, and a 3-tier pink and gold castle cake that I'd spent 6 hours decorating the night before. Everything was child-sized, child-friendly, and designed to minimize mess while maximizing fun. When it came time for cake and singing, I had everything organized. The kids sat in a semicircle on the grass, I'd put down blankets, and Princess Belle led them in a special, princess version of Happy Birthday. Lily got to make her wish and blow out the candles while everyone cheered. Then, instead of the usual chaos of cake cutting and distribution, I had a system. Each child received their slice on a themed paper plate with their name on it, along with a napkin and a plastic fork. No grabbing, no pushing, no mess. But the best part? Every single child was happy, engaged, and well-behaved. Turns out, when you plan age-appropriate activities and provide proper supervision, kids don't need to run wild to have fun. Who would have thought? I watched Lily's face glow with joy as she played with her friends, and I felt this overwhelming sense of satisfaction. This was what a children's party should look like. This was what my daughter deserved. She wasn't just having fun, she was learning that she was worthy of celebration, that her happiness mattered, and that parties could be magical without being chaotic. The other parents were equally impressed. Several commented that it was the most well-organized children's party they'd ever attended. One mom asked if I did party planning professionally. Another said her daughter was already asking when the next princess party would be. But more than the compliments, I could see the relief on the parents' faces. They were actually relaxing, actually enjoying watching their children play, instead of constantly worrying about what might get broken or who might get hurt. They were having real conversations while their kids played safely and happily in the background. The party was supposed to end at 3 p.m., but the kids were having so much fun that most parents were happy to let them stay longer. We'd moved into free playtime in the bounce house, with Princess Belle supervising and making sure everyone got turns and played safely together. I was cleaning up some of the craft supplies and chatting with parents when I heard a car door slam in my driveway. Evelyn came storming around the corner of the house with Jake and Emma in tow, both of them in their car seats, pajamas, and looking like they'd just woken up from naps. Her face was red with anger, and she was walking with that determined stride I remembered from our childhood, the one that meant someone was about to get lectured. "What the hell is this?" she demanded, gesturing wildly at the party decorations. All the parents and children turned to stare. The poor teenager dressed as Belle looked terrified. Lily, who had been about to blow out her candles, started to tear up. "It's Lily's birthday party," I said calmly, stepping between Evelyn and the party guests. "Why system, you know damn well what I mean. Why weren't my children invited?" Jake and Emma, seeing the bounce house and decorations, immediately started whining and crying. "We want to play, we want cake, why can't we play?" The contrast was stark. Here were 8 children who had been playing happily for 2 hours, and within 30 seconds of Jake and Emma arriving, there was chaos and tears. "Evelyn, please lower your voice. You're scaring the children. Don't you dare tell me to lower my voice. These are my nephew and niece's cousins, family. How could you exclude them?" I looked around at the party guests, parents who had been chatting and relaxing while their children played safely, kids who had been laughing and having fun, and I saw them all staring at this woman having a meltdown at a 5-year-old's birthday party. This was my moment. This was what I'd been preparing for. I smiled at Evelyn, the same condescending smile she'd given me for 2 years, and said in my sweetest voice, "Oh, this is more of a well-behaved children-only affair. You know how it is. I want the kids to actually enjoy the party without constantly managing behavioral issues. These children are old enough to behave appropriately." The silence was deafening. Evelyn's mouth fell open. Several parents were clearly trying not to laugh. Jake and Emma continued to wail about wanting cake and wanting to play. But they're just kids," Evelyn stammered. "Exactly," I said, gesturing to the 8 children who were quietly watching this adult have a tantrum. "They're kids. This is a kids' party for kids who know how to act at kids' parties." Evelyn looked around at the other parents, clearly expecting support, but found only polite smiles and raised eyebrows. One dad was literally biting his lip to keep from laughing. "You can't be serious," she said. "I'm completely serious," I replied. "Just like you were serious every time you told me my children couldn't come to your parties because you wanted a civilized atmosphere. Well, this is my civilized atmosphere." Jake had started pulling on one of the streamers, and Emma was reaching for the cake with sticky fingers. Without thinking, 2 of the other parents gently redirected them, exactly the kind of natural supervision that happens when adults actually pay attention to children. "That's completely different," Evelyn protested. "How is it different?" "Because your parties were adults only, even though they were full of children, and my party is well-behaved, children only. Even though Jake and Emma are children?" The truth hung in the air like a challenge. One of the other moms, Lisa, who I'd become friendly with through preschool, stepped forward. "Evelyn, is it? I think maybe this isn't the best time or place for this conversation. The kids are trying to celebrate." Evelyn looked around again, finally seeming to realize that she was the only adult at this party who was yelling. Every other parent was calm. Every other child was either playing quietly or watching her with wide eyes. "This isn't over," she hissed at me. "You're absolutely right," I said calmly. "It's not over. It's just beginning. From now on, when I throw parties for my children, I'm going to invite children who enhance the experience, not detract from it, just like you do." Evelyn grabbed Jake and Emma, both still crying about cake, and stormed off toward her car. As she was buckling them into their car seats, I heard Emma scream, "I want princess cake!" and Jake yelling, "It's not fair!" The irony was not lost on anyone. After Evelyn left, there was a moment of awkward silence before Lisa started clapping slowly. "Well," she said, "that was the most polite revenge I've ever witnessed." The other parents laughed, and gradually the party atmosphere returned. Lily blew out her candles, we cut the cake, and the kids went back to playing. But I could tell that several of the parents wanted the full story, and I found myself explaining the situation to a few of them. "So she's been excluding your kids from family parties for 2 years?" asked Mike, another preschool parent. "Every single one," I confirmed. "And she let her own kids run wild while calling it adults only?" asked Jennifer. "Destroyed her own house every time. And she's mad that you threw your daughter a nice party and didn't invite the kids who always cause problems?" Apparently. The consensus was unanimous. I had handled it perfectly. The rest of the party went off without a hitch. The kids played until almost 5 p.m., and when parents finally started collecting their children, every single one thanked me for throwing such a wonderful, well-organized party. Several mentioned that their kids were already asking when the next party would be, but the real validation came from Lily herself. As I was tucking her into bed that night, still in her princess dress because she refused to take it off, she looked up at me with sleepy, happy eyes. "Mommy, that was the best day ever. I'm so glad, sweetheart. You deserved a perfect princess party. All my friends had fun, and nobody was mean, and nobody broke anything, and Belle was so nice, and the cake was so pretty." She fell asleep mid-sentence, still smiling. The aftermath was interesting. Evelyn didn't speak to me for 3 weeks. Our mother called multiple times, trying to get me to make peace and be the bigger person. I politely explained the situation each time, and eventually even Mom had to admit that Evelyn's behavior over the past 2 years had been problematic. During those 3 weeks, I had time to process what had happened and prepare for the inevitable family drama. I knew Evelyn would try to turn this into a story where I was the villain, so I made sure I had all my facts straight. I reviewed my journal entries, gathered testimonies from other family members who had witnessed the chaos at Evelyn's parties, and prepared myself for every possible argument she might make. The first person to contact me was my mother, exactly 2 days after the party. "I heard there was some drama at Lily's birthday party," Mom said, using that carefully neutral tone she employed when she was trying to get information without taking sides. "There was," I confirmed. "Evelyn showed up uninvited and caused a scene because Jake and Emma weren't invited." "Well, they are family, honey. Maybe you could have made an exception." This was the moment I'd been preparing for. "Mom, let me ask you something. In the past 2 years, how many of Evelyn's parties have included Lily and Max?" There was a long pause. "While Evelyn likes to keep her parties more adult-focused." "Zero, Mom." "The answer is 0. Lily and Max have been excluded from every single family celebration Evelyn has hosted for 2 years. Every birthday, every holiday party, every gathering. They've sat in the car, watching their cousins get cake and presents, while being told they weren't welcome. But surely there was a reason. The reason was that Evelyn wanted adults-only parties. Except they weren't adults-only. They were full of children, just not my children." Another pause. "I didn't realize it was every party, every single one. And now, when I throw one party that's actually planned for children, with appropriate activities and supervision, suddenly I'm the bad guy for not including the kids who have never been taught how to behave at parties." By the end of that conversation, Mom was much more understanding. But she wasn't the only family member I had to educate. My older brother called next, having heard Evelyn's version of events. "Come on, sis. Don't you think you're being a little harsh? They're just kids." "You're right, they are just kids. Kids who hit other children, destroy property, and throw food at people while their mother gets drunk and calls it natural exuberance." "When was the last time you brought your kids to one of Evelyn's parties?" "Well, we live pretty far away." "When was the last time you even stayed on a video call for one of her parties? Be honest." He was quiet for a moment. "Okay, fine. The chaos is pretty intense, but that doesn't mean you should exclude them from family events." "I'm not excluding them from family events. I'm excluding them from events where their behavior would ruin the experience for everyone else, just like Evelyn has been doing to my kids for 2 years." The conversation with my Aunt Linda was particularly illuminating. She'd attended several of Evelyn's parties and had witnessed the destruction firsthand. "Honestly, I've been wondering when someone was going to address this," she admitted. "Last year at Jake's party, I watched him deliberately break another child's toy. And when the kid started crying, Evelyn just shrugged and said, 'Boys will be boys.' The poor child was devastated. Why didn't anyone say anything? Because Evelyn gets so defensive. Any criticism of her parenting or her parties gets met with lectures about how she's raising free-spirited children and how the rest of us are too uptight. It's exhausting." These conversations revealed something I hadn't fully understood before. Evelyn's behavior had been affecting the entire family, not just me and my children. Other relatives had been walking on eggshells around her for years, avoiding her parties or enduring them in silence, because no one wanted to deal with her defensive reactions. "But she's your sister," Mom kept saying during our follow-up conversations. "And Lily and Max are her niece and nephew." But that didn't stop her from excluding them from every family celebration. The extended family drama was predictable but manageable. Some relatives took Evelyn's side, others took mine, and a few just stayed out of it entirely. But the funny thing was, the more people heard the full story, the more they seemed to understand my position. What surprised me was how many family members privately reached out to share their own experiences with Evelyn's parties. My cousin Beth told me about the time Emma deliberately pushed her toddler off a ride-on toy at a family gathering, and when Beth tried to address it, Evelyn accused her of targeting Emma. My Uncle Dave mentioned that he'd stopped bringing his kids to Evelyn's house because Jake had bitten his son during a previous visit, and Evelyn's response was to blame his son for provoking Jake. I realized that I wasn't the only one who had been dealing with Evelyn's boundary issues and her children's problematic behavior. The difference was that I had finally reached my limit and decided to do something about it instead of just enduring it in silence. My Aunt Carol, who had attended several of Evelyn's chaotic parties, actually called to congratulate me. I've been wondering when someone was going to call her out on those disaster parties. Good for you. The most interesting conversation was with my cousin Rachel, who had initially seemed to side with Evelyn in the immediate aftermath of the party. But a week later, she called me back. "I've been thinking about what you said," she began, "about the pattern of exclusion. And I realized something. I've been making excuses not to bring my kids to Evelyn's parties for months, because they always come home upset or hurt. But I never connected that to the fact that your kids were never invited at all. It's easy to miss when you're in the middle of it," I said. "No, it's not easy to miss. I chose not to see it because it was easier than confronting the problem. I'm sorry, you were right to do what you did, but the best part came about a month later. Evelyn finally called me, and I could tell from her voice that she was trying to swallow her pride. Look," she said, "maybe we both made some mistakes." "Maybe we did," I agreed. "Jake and Emma have been asking about Lily's party non-stop. They keep talking about the princess and the castle cake. It was a pretty great party," I said neutrally. "I was thinking, maybe for their birthday this year you could help me plan something, more structured." I almost smiled. Almost. "I'd be happy to help you plan a party that's actually appropriate for children," I said, "with proper supervision, age-appropriate activities, and realistic expectations for behavior. And maybe, Lily and Max could come. If it's actually a children's party where children are welcome and expected to behave like children, not like wild animals, then yes, they can come." There was a long pause. "Okay," she said quietly. "Okay. I think I understand what you're saying." We planned Jake and Emma's party together, and it was a revelation for Evelyn when she saw how much fun kids could have with proper structure and supervision, when she experienced a party where adults could actually relax because the children were engaged and happy. I think she finally understood what I'd been trying to show her. The party was a success. Jake and Emma had a blast, and for the first time in 2 years, Lily and Max got to celebrate with their cousins. There were still moments of chaos. Jake is still Jake after all. But with proper planning and supervision, they were manageable. Afterward, as we were cleaning up, Evelyn looked at me and said, "I owe you an apology." "For what?" "For the last 2 years. For excluding Lily and Max. For not seeing how my parties were affecting everyone else. It wasn't a perfect apology, and our relationship is still complicated, but it was a start. Looking back, I don't regret anything about Lily's princess party. Some people might say I was petty, and maybe I was. But sometimes being petty is just another word for setting boundaries. Sometimes excluding someone is just another word for having standards. My children deserve to feel included in family celebrations. They deserve to experience parties that are actually fun for kids. And I deserve to throw my daughter a birthday party without having to worry about other children destroying everything while their parents get drunk and ignore the chaos. The best revenge, as they say, is living well, or in this case, partying well. Lily still talks about her princess party 6 months later. She still has the magic wand she made, and she still occasionally wears the crown we gave each guest as a party favor. But more importantly, she now gets to attend birthday parties with her cousins. Parties where all the children are welcome, supervised, and expected to behave appropriately. Sometimes you have to exclude people to include everyone else. Sometimes you have to say no to teach someone else what yes really means. And sometimes you have to throw the perfect party to show someone else what they've been doing wrong. I have no regrets.